Welcome to the Record Machine Show podcast. And now, here's your host, James Michael Hollenstein.
We are pleased to present an exceptional program today featuring Linda Marks, a singer-songwriter from the Boston area. We will thoroughly explore her personal journey as it relates to her 15th studio album, The Silence of the Stars. To commence the show, we will first enjoy a musical piece titled Motherless Daughters, Fatherless Sons.
I am your daughter, you are my mom. You were weary long before you birthed me into this world. Lost your mom when you were 12, carried the household by yourself, put yourself through college without help from anyone. And yet, motherless daughters, fatherless sons. I am your mother, you are my son. Emotional nurturance was not something he could offer you. His own challenged mental health, so focused was himself, still cannot see the pain that he's passed on to you. And yet, motherless daughters, fatherless sons, haunted or uplifted by folks we never knew. Neglect or care shapes our DNA. Our ancestors live in us, in our face and in our eyes, and his ghosts who spook us deep inside. Motherless daughters, fatherless sons, carry the wounds of generations passed on to them through no fault of their own. Inside they feel alone. They do their best but struggle in a heartless world. And yet, motherless daughters, fatherless sons, haunted or uplifted by folks we never knew. Neglect or care shapes our DNA. Our ancestors live in us, in our face and in our eyes, and his ghosts who spook us deep inside. A motherless daughter with a fatherless son. It is humbling that the legacies passed on through us, though we heal and though we grow, we'll never really know how much our efforts will transform what lies ahead. And yet, and yet, love is real.
You just heard Motherless Daughters, Fatherless Sons, one of the singles from her latest album, The Silence of the Stars. We now have Linda on the line for an exclusive interview. Linda, how you doing?
Good. How are you, James?
I'm doing very good. It's a nice day here in North Myrtle Beach. Where are you calling from?
Oh, my goodness. I'm up in Waltham, Massachusetts, which is near Boston, and it's a nicer day than it has been because it's about 33 degrees as opposed to 6 or 17, so I'll take it.
Are you a Patriots fan?
I'm a Patriots fan, and this has been a painful year. Actually, I was watching the Patriots game up until it was time to do our interview, and I just came up from the Patriots game. And Joe Milton, he's a rookie and hadn't gotten to start yet. He started the game. He's actually doing a great job. So
awesome. I'm a Bills fan.
Yep. Well, Bills are fantastic. Josh Allen is fantastic. And he's not playing. Trubinsky is playing. And Trubinsky looks okay, too. But this is sort of a funny game because for the Patriots to lose, it gives them the first draft pick. And if they win, does it impact whether or not Gerard Mayo gets to coach? For the Bills, they're already in good shape. Sure, it always feels good to win another game, but they're basically their record is the mirror of the Patriots. The Bills are 13-3. Mm-hmm. The Patriots are 3-13. So.
Right, the Bills have nothing to lose today because if they win, they're not going to move up in the rank for the number 1 seed, and if they lose, they're not going to lose their number 2 seed. So
exactly. So they've done what they need to do. It's mind you, it always feels good to win, but they don't. It doesn't really matter. And I thought Josh Allen might just play a little bit for the the whole Iron Man thing,
right?
But it's probably much better to not have him play so he doesn't get injured. Drake May, on the other hand, had a head injury last time, and I can't believe they were stupid enough to put him in with a head injury, but they did.
Right.
And at least this time they didn't.
Now he's going to be their guy next year, right? Drake May. So if they do get the number 1 pick, they're gonna need to get him either a weapon or a defensive weapon, right?
They need a lot. They need weapons. They need the offensive line to have a clue. They need the defensive line to have a clue because up until this year, when Belichick was there, he paid attention to defense, and Gerard Mayo was in a position that had more impact on the defense. This year, poor Gerard Mayo, with no coaching or guiding for him in his first year, was dealing with the political football of Robert Kraft and Elliot Wolf. So the long and short of it is a lot of people say that if the Patriots do get the first draft pick, they'll trade so that they can get more people because their need for good people is huge. And, Drake May is fantastic, but for him to not have constant concussions and to be able to develop the way he's capable, and he's shown how capable he is even at such a young age, they have to give him something.
Absolutely. Now, you said you're in the Massachusetts area, right?
Yeah.
Is that where you were born and raised?
I was born and raised in Massachusetts. I went to college in Connecticut. And when I was in my early 20s, I did a lot of work overseas, and particularly in London, because my side hustle, I'm a mind-body psychotherapist, and I was a pioneer in that field. I wrote a book. I was teaching at conferences as a very young person, and people understood that part of my work better than they did in this country. So I considered moving to Europe, but I didn't. And it just has seemed like, this area has been a base for me, even though there was, and actually when my first book came out in 1989, as a very young person, I did a lot of traveling all over the U.S., speaking and teaching and being on TV and National Public Radio and stuff like that. And as an introvert, I can do that, but that's not going to be my happy life, traveling all over the place, just like as a singer-songwriter. I'm happy to mostly gig in, within a drive of where I live,
right,
and not be a person that's on the road. And, I have pets. I have a young adult son,
right.
I have a garden, it's very hard, having had the taste of that when I was very, very young, of the traveling all over the place, for teaching and speaking. It's cool being all different places and meeting people and bringing your work to people. But you can't really have a life. You can't sustain friendships. You can't see humans. Your pets get pissed.
Right, definitely. My cats get pissed when I'm not around for a long period of time. We have 3 of them, so.
Good. I have 7 actually.
Oh, nice.
And a corgi.
Very cool.
My oldest is right here beside me. She's 19 years old.
Oh, wow.
She's my oldest. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So tell me, how did you first become interested in music, and when did you start playing your first instrument in singing?
Music was my native language. When I was a very, very small child, I didn't talk until I was 3. But even as a toddler who wasn't talking, whenever any piano was within toddling range, I would toddle my way over. It was like the piano was a magnet. And I would just start writing music. It was in me. And so I can say music has been with me since the moment I was born. And I started writing music as soon as I had some pathway for expression. Initially, it was the keyboard, because if you can't talk, you can't write words. And when I did start to talk, I started writing poetry very young. So in terms of instruments, I had no instruments. And my first word was piano. And my mom noticed that I was saying piano all the time. And she noticed that I would toddle my way to any piano I could find. So she thought maybe I was interested in the piano, but I had a father who was terrified about my passion for music. He was afraid as a musician I could never support myself and I'd be starving and on the street. So his little mantra was, music is a waste of a good mind. And that's a horrible thing to say to a little girl whose passion is music. So my mom found this free, which is the operative word, program at a place called the Laundry School of Music in Boston. And they had an experimental program for very young children to learn to play the recorder. So when I was 2 or 3 years old, I was put in that experimental program. And I had no interest in the recorder, but I took to it anyhow. And my parents were told that I was gifted and talented and that I should be encouraged, which only made my father more angry. It was not what he wanted to hear. So when I was 11, I had saved up enough money to buy a guitar, and I found a place that had just been flooded and had to get rid of their inventory. So I bought myself a classical aria guitar with nylon strings when I was 11 with money I'd saved doing anything a little kid can do to work. And I got a guitar chart and chord chart, and I started teaching myself guitar. So now when I wrote songs, I could accompany myself. And when I was in 8th grade, I wrote the graduation song for my whole class, and I played guitar and sang lead and had my entire class sing the chorus with me. So that was my first commission with no money, but publicly performed piece. And when I was 13, I also had finally saved up enough money to buy my own piano. And when I was a little kid, there was a cartoon called Roadrunner that was around, and I would watch it. And there was this character, Wile E. Coyote, and everything he got was from the Acme company. So I found an Acme piano store, of course, and that is where I found my Rika & Sons upright piano that was the amount of money that I had saved for my whole life as a little girl. So I talked with the people at the store. And then I went down to my parents and I said, I've worked really hard for years. I've saved the money. I've located the piano. Can you please drive me to the store? I'm 13. I can't drive myself. And is there somewhere I can put it? So at that point, I think they realized I was serious. And unfortunately, the piano was put on the 2-season freezing porch. And I was only allowed to play when no one was home because it was right behind where my father's TV was, and he didn't want my music to interrupt his TV watching. The long and short of it is, and in many ways this relates to my brand new album, The Silence of the Stars, which was just released on January 1st, which is my 15th studio album. The album is, and the title song, The Silence of the Stars, is an autobiographical song, and it tells the story of a little girl whose passion for music was quashed by her angry father. And the album and its songs represent a heroine's journey. The little girl embraced it and overcoming a litany of life's obstacles, including several decades away from music when I raised my now young adult son as a single mom with no child support and cared for a mom with Alzheimer's, that it was important enough in my heart and soul that no matter the obstacles thrown my way, I was going to persevere. And so having a 15th studio album means a whole lot to me. Mm-hmm. And this particular collection has a lot of autobiographical songs. So far, the people who've listened have all said it's amazing, which is great. And I hope it spreads far and wide. And as an artist, I know that it's virtually impossible to make back the money it costs to make a really good album in today's world, where on Spotify you get fractions of a penny for a listen. Mm-hmm. But my hope is at least the music will reach people and touch people. And that's the real reason any artist creates, to touch people and make a difference.
Exactly. Very impressive 15 studio albums. Who were your earliest musical influences growing up?
Well, I listened to everything I could possibly listen to. Somehow, I'm not quite sure how I discovered music theater, but I did. And like Godspell and Pippin were two musicals when I was very young that I really loved. And I also loved Dionne Warwick. Was a little girl. She was a fantastic singer, mm-hmm. and she sang the Bacharach David songbook. So I learned every song in the Bacharach David songbook. On the other hand, someone like Harry Belafonte, when I was a little kid, like in nursery school, I'd get exposed to folk music and Harry Belafonte. So I started to pay attention to him and to Pete Seeger. And, later people like Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell, and the whole singer-songwriter movement started when I was a kid as well. So Carole King, Gordon Lightfoot, James Taylor, Carla Bonoff, all of their music. And because I'm a blonde, curly-haired piano player, the comparison to Carole King started very early, and I've recorded a number of her songs, and I once even did a Carole King show.
Nice.
But there are so many influences and so many people. I also have always loved jazz, and particularly, I'm just trying to think how far back this took me. Well, when I was in graduate school, which was also in my 20s, I started to listen to a radio station called Magic 106.7 in the Boston area. And they had smooth jazz. And I've always been in love with the saxophone. I have saxophone on a whole bunch of my music. And so that was something that I had a passion for. Actually, even I went to Yale and have an undergraduate degree in music in spite of the fact that I was self-taught and I didn't come from privilege. I didn't have, fancy lessons. I was the little girl who saved her own money to buy her piano and taught herself. But I wrote a song when I was 17 years old and a freshman that was for piano, voice, and soprano sax. And I'd never played a soprano sax. I'd never sat with a soprano sax player. I just heard it in my mind. And I remember when I sat down with a graduate student from the Yale School of Music who was going to play what I'd written, and then heard them play exactly what I heard in my mind as I sang and played the piano, I burst into tears, because the ability to hear and to orchestrate was always there. Even if I didn't play an instrument, I could still hear things. And mm-hmm. as an artist now, I have some things I give to my musicians, but people that are an expert and a master of an instrument know far more, nuances than I do for any instrument. Mm-hmm. So, at this point, I might give them direction, but then I let them go to town with their mastery, because I'm not a saxophonist or a violinist or a cellist or a banjo player or fill in the blank. And it's wonderful to collaborate with people where that's their mastery. So nice. Anyhow, yeah, my musical roots run through my life in many different chapters. Very
cool. This podcast showcases two of your tracks, Motherless mm-hmm. Daughters, Fatherless Sons, and the song Heroes. Can you share the stories that inspired these songs?
Certainly. Motherless Daughters, Fatherless Sons is on the Silence of the Stars. And interestingly enough, even before it was produced and released, it started winning awards. It's won a number of awards. It was nominated for a Josie Music Award this year for songwriting achievement. I lose track of all the awards. It got a Global Music Award. It has other awards, and but what inspired the song, and this gets into my side hustle as a mind-body psychotherapist, specifically a trauma-informed one, is that many of the things that we notice in our lives or that happen in our lives reflect things that have happened to the people in our families before us. Mm-hmm. And there's a field called epigenetics that many people have learned about of late, which looks at how the experiences of our ancestors literally are wired into our DNA. And an example is if a person lived through the Irish potato famine, mm-hmm. their metabolism may have shifted in order to survive when there was so little food, so that a couple generations away from the Irish potato famine, there may be people who gain weight eating very little, and you can see the metabolic impact several generations down from the people that live through that experience. Mm-hmm. And it happens both physically and psychologically. So Motherless Daughters, Fatherless Sons is an autobiographical song. My mom was in essence a motherless daughter. She lost her mom when she was 12. And she was so burnt out by the time she had me, she raised her younger sister when she lost her mom, that in essence, I became a parentified motherless daughter, much as she did. And my son, sadly, had a father who was not really present. I raised my son without child support and as a single mom. Mm-hmm. And just looking at no matter how hard I have tried psychologically to work on healing those transgenerational pieces that have come down both through my mother line and father line, I still see some of them showing up, in my generation and even in my son. Mm-hmm. So Motherless Daughters, Fatherless Sons is about what gets passed down through our DNA.
Nice.
And in terms of heroes, that goes back to 2019. As we were talking before we started formally talking, I've been a sports-oriented kid since I was very little. Mm-hmm. And, I love baseball, I love football, I love basketball. And baseball was a real passion when I was little, to the point that I managed to get myself a job when I got my working papers at 14 at Fenway Park, the Boston Red Sox Stadium.
Nice. And
so when David Ortiz was on the Red Sox, I followed him closely as a personality, as a really bright light, as well as a phenomenal player. And when my son was 12, I brought him to a game where before the game, kids were allowed to meet some of the players. And what I noticed about David Ortiz was he was so kind. Mm-hmm. He wanted every single kid who'd come to say hello to get a chance to say hello. So when the guards were saying, sorry, you got to stop, and there were still kids waiting, mm-hmm. David Ortiz pushed back and said, I don't want to disappoint one child. I'm going to stay here till I've gotten to say hello to every child, because that means something to the child. Nice. So that he really touched me that day when I saw his response to the kids. So in July of 2019, when he was shot in the Dominican Republic, it went through me like a bullet myself. Mm-hmm. And I started to ask, how did that happen? Why did that happen? I have this sort of natural inclination when things like that happen to sort of go deeper on, like, what's going on? What does this mean at a more global level, at a spiritual level, not mm-hmm. just, hey, it's more gun violence. And so I realized that people shoot their heroes. When I was a little girl, I was very, very small when JFK and Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy were shot. I was so little, it felt like it was like all on top of itself, even though I know it wasn't all on top of itself, but it was in a short period of time. And most kids who were as young as I wouldn't have even noticed such a thing, but it had a huge impact on me. And I was always a shy introvert, but a natural leader who got thrust into positions of leadership, whether I wanted it or not, and then did such a good job that I was thrust into more positions of leadership. So, I had always felt that I was like people like Martin Luther King, someone who is more of a social architect and a social engineer, and not so much like the business kind of entrepreneur. I was, I guess, a social entrepreneur in that sense. But I was afraid to be out as that because I saw that people that did that were killed. And now David Ortiz, someone was trying to kill him. So I really looked at all of that and realized that when a person is shining, when a person is making a difference and doing a lot of positive things, that there are some people that just come out and have to shoot out the light. And that's what was behind writing Heroes.
Yeah, it's a great song. When I read the article, there's an article about that as well. If anyone's listening, definitely check it out.
It was in the Boston Globe. I was very grateful. I was on the front page of the Boston Globe sports section. And the article was written by a very, very fine journalist, someone who has the old school, high integrity values of journalism. And I'm so grateful that he covered me. And even how that happened was quite something. When the event happened and I immediately started to write the song, I had just finished the song. I had just done like a piano vocal demo in the studio. And this journalist, whose name is Bob Holler, wrote an article exploring why might this have happened. And many of the questions he was asking and much of what he wrote about mirrored the lyrics of my song.
Wow.
So I immediately wrote to him, sent him just my piano vocal demo, and said, your article really resonated with me because you're asking many of the questions that I covered in my song. So he called me up right away, interviewed me, and I needed to have my song available and released like within 48 hours, which, considering I'd only done a piano vocal demo in the studio, I wasn't all produced yet, but I did a very good job of a piano vocal version that could be released quickly, because once you get covered in a major paper, you need that to be audible. So I was very grateful for that. So it's very powerful when, as a songwriter who writes at the heart of our times, where something happens and it strikes a chord in me, I respond with a song, and then it strikes a chord in others.
Absolutely. I picked that song for a reason. I'm a huge baseball fan. I'm a Yankees fan, but I do have a lot of respect for other teams, especially David Ortiz. He's a great player, great human being, and also he's pretty entertaining on that Fox baseball pregame show.
He does a fantastic job. I wish Tom Brady had the same that David Ortiz did when he moves to the broadcast booth.
Yeah, him and Jeter and A-Rod and Kevin Burkhardt, they're pretty good together.
Yeah. They're a great team. I love when they cover games, and for the big games like the playoffs and the World Series, they're usually the team. So I really enjoy them. Yeah,
it's a great song. And there's a video for that as well, right?
Yes, there is. There is a video for that.
It's on your YouTube page?
My YouTube channel is LSMHEART, LSM Heart. I love my YouTube channel because I have so much different content. I have everything from, hey, I just wrote this song, and I do studio videos often when my songs are new, to, lyric videos of fully produced songs, to clips from different live performances. All kinds of content is on the YouTube channel. But yes, there's a video for Heroes.
Excellent. Can you describe your typical songwriting process? Do you begin with lyrics, melody, or something else?
It's actually, I would say neither, because I call it a song seed starts. My most recent song that's being produced, and it's having to be produced really quickly because it's very timely, happened on December 4th, when at that point an unidentified young man with a mask and a hoodie in Midtown Manhattan at about 6:54 a.m. brought out a homemade gun and shot Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare. And both because of my side hustle in mind-body psychotherapy, and therefore having heard the stories, the horror stories of many people about trying to get access to care, and even seeing that happen in my own family, I found myself, pulled into that much as I did when the David Ortiz incident happened. And I started finding myself fascinated in the response. So many people were cheering on what happened. And mind you, I don't think it's ever okay to kill someone. That's a crime. It's horrible. But then on the other side, what on earth could have happened to a human being to the point that they could have done that?
Right.
So I started reading and listening to every single story, every single, interview with a friend, anything I could find to learn about who is Luigi Mangione and what could have happened. And so what started to grow as I, for 2 weeks, poured through everything I could find, and many of my questions, I couldn't find what I'm interested in, particularly what happened between May of 2024 when he turned 26 and December 4th when he presumably, he's not, you're innocent till proven guilty, but presumably did something. And that whole period, there is radio silence about what happened, but it feels like he had some sort of breakdown. And so, what I realized and learned is he has lived with debilitating pain his whole life. He got Lyme disease when he was 13 years old with brain fog, cloudy thinking. You have pain. There are so many symptoms from Lyme disease, and the medical doctors know so little and don't really know how to help people. And when he was reaching out for help as a teen and in early college when it was affecting him, no one believed him or heard him. And that was devastating. Plus, he has a spinal condition where his discs slip, and it caused tremendous pain. And after an injury to that already painful condition, when he tried a beginner's surfing lesson in Hawaii, and he was in bed for a week in pain, he had lived with so much pain. And when you have that kind of physical pain, it causes psychic anguish. Plus, he probably had psychic anguish from other sorts. But I wrote a song called Pain Changes Everything, and it's an amazingly powerful song. It has amazingly powerful lyrics, many of them in Luigi's words. And the response I got as soon as I started to send it to people was, this is amazing. This has to be out now. So what happened, I get pulled into something that happens that sort of strikes a deep chord. I find myself looking at the story. What story is the song going to tell? And, from that, some words come, some music comes. It's sort of like you're putting together a jigsaw puzzle, but no one gave you the box of the pieces. Right. You sort of have to both make the pieces and, color them in organically, sort of as I call it, as the song seed starts to sprout and germinate. And then, as I probably wrote 10 pages of lyrics, which had to be funneled down into one song. And I had different, music that went with different sections. There's a piano hook, that's a cool pattern. And there was a point that came in. And so it's sort of, it's an organic process. And I can't say, I start here and then I do this. It's more like there's a lot of ground to cover that has to include lyrics, that has to include music, that has to have a coherent story, that has to be well crafted, and that has to really hang together in a way that the listener follows it and is touched by it. And so it's very much like being a sculptress. You have a piece of clay and, something comes to you and you work with the clay and you sculpt it. And in time, a vision emerges, and in time you try to make that vision real through the clay.
Nice. What's the most profound emotional experience you've had while creating or performing music?
Well, creating and performing are different. They're very different. In terms of creating, sometimes there are some songs that I wrote. My son went through a very, very hard time during the beginning of the pandemic for the first couple of years. And some of it is his transgenerational trauma. Some of it is what he's inherited in his DNA. And it involved having to bump up against the healthcare system, which is extremely devastating. It's an iron wall. I understand what Luigi was fighting against and many other people have experienced. And it was better then than it is in 2025. And the whole experience was overwhelming. It was excruciating. And in the process of writing some songs that were on another one of my albums, I was able to, through the music, both express and process what I was going through and create something that was very poignant for another person to hear. So, it's in many ways, songwriting is like alchemy, emotional alchemy. And there are many songs I write that are that kind of thing, whether it's like the David Ortiz song or the Luigi Mangione song, where I'm responding to something happening in society. Gun violence pulls me like that. I've written quite a few songs related to healing around that. I even wrote a song about healing anti-Semitism because of what's going on. That was a song I never imagined I'd write. So, it's very powerful and painful whether it's confronting what's happening in our world around us or it's confronting things happening in my own life. In terms of performing, meaningful moments, well, when people have come up to me after I've sung something or performed something, or when they've been part of a song that they've sung with me, because I tend to write anthemic songs on my new album, The Silence of the Stars, Be the Change, and Lighthouse are two examples of that. They're both very uplifting, empowering songs of hope and vision, where there's a chorus where people can sing along. You know, I sometimes am in tears when people are singing along, but I also have found myself in tears where someone comes up to me, and because of the songs that I shared, they tell me a story about their life that relates to the song. And one song in particular that's on an album from the early 2020s, maybe even 2020, it's called The Gardener, and it's a song about my mom's Alzheimer's journey.
Wow.
The Quiet Lady. It's called The Gardener, the quiet lady gardening in her mind. As all of her capacities disappeared, her lifelong love of gardening was still a thread. And she would garden on the lawn, not even in a garden. She'd sort through twigs and stones on the lawn, not, for hours. When she couldn't do that anymore, she'd do it on the rug. And even when she broke her hip in a rehab, she'd get down on the floor and make the gardening motion. And the stupid people there were saying she's psychotic. We need to give her antipsychotics. And I'd say, no, she has Alzheimer's and she's a gardener. She's trying to garden. Don't you get it? So anyhow, it's a powerful song about her journey of the quiet lady gardening in her mind. And when I've sung that song, people come up and tell me stories, whether they had a parent with Alzheimer's or something else, something that happened with a relative as they were declining. And it's very poignant to hear that something I've shared has really touched somebody that way.
Awesome. You've achieved remarkable success as a recipient of the gold medal at the 2024 One Earth Music Awards, a finalist in the 2024 Great American Song Competition, winner of a 2024 World Songwriting Awards for Best Collaboration. Additionally, you've reached the number one position on the UK Hot 100, been recognized as ISA number one folk artist of March 2024. You received a nomination for the 2024 Josie Awards and have been named a finalist in the 2024 ISA Awards. What's it like to engage in a passion that brings you such fulfillment only to be nominated or honored with an award for your efforts?
Well, I have gratitude, and it's humbling, but it's a lot of things because, I had a colleague I went to Yale with, and she writes sort of funny video songs. And one of her videos did really well and sort of started to go viral. And so she wrote, "Overnight success after 35 years is busting my butt," So it's, there's a degree of that. It's like I've been doing this my whole life. And it's something that it's who I am. I wrote a song when I was in grammar school called My Music Is Me. And so I'm very grateful when there's recognition. I'm grateful I'm on a Grammy-nominated project. I'm just a guest artist on it. It's not one of my own projects, but I'm grateful to be on it. I was nominated for a World Entertainment Award, and that's the same weekend as the Grammys, right next door in Beverly Hills. The awards have been coming fast and furious over the last handful of years, and it's, perhaps I just count my blessings saying I've been working really hard my whole life. I always want to learn. I always want to grow. I want to get better at whatever I do. I want to be more effective. And it's just a way of saying, okay, all this work is resonating with people. When to win contests like that, it's people who are industry professionals that are jurying and selecting out of God knows how many tens of thousands of people or more. So it's, I'm just grateful and I'm touched by it. And it's just another way of just saying, if you follow your heart and you try to continuously better yourself and learn and grow, in time, you can become better and better and more effective at whatever you do. And the bottom line is reach people.
It's nice to prove people wrong too, right?
Well, I don't even think of things that way. I mean, my father, who was terrified his daughter would become, a musician and starve. Well, he was certainly right in that I can't make a living doing all these things that win all kinds of global awards. I have to have two professions in order to be able to follow my primary profession. Thank God I love both of them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not why you don't squish that in a child.
Right.
My son has had passions of things I don't know anything about, but I support him because that's him. He's got to follow his passion. And I, as a parent, it's my job to see who my son is and do it. And just like, with other children or even with my clients as a therapist, my job is to see the depths of who they are and nurture and support that so that they can be fulfilled, happy people. And, like my song Lighthouse, everybody has a unique light to shine. There are boats out on the water that need to see our light. And if we don't shine our light, there are people that won't be able to receive or grow in ways that actually will only happen if they do see our light. And likewise, if, we need to see other people's lights too. So it's a win-win-win. So, for me, it's who I am. I have to be it because that's what makes me vital and peaceful and happy and alive. And I want to be alive and I want to shine my light. As long as I'm given the opportunity. I can imagine myself being 100 years old and still writing music. And, who knows, maybe I'll get a Grammy at some advanced age and, there'll be a whole model of if you do something your whole life, you can actually, achieve the highest possible. In fact, at last year's Grammys, I'm very grateful that I'm a member of the Recording Academy and I get to listen to and vote for music in the Grammys. There was a woman in the Premier Awards, which are the ones that happen before the telecast, about 95% or more of the awards are not shown on television. And that is a very profound event because it's in a theater and you're sitting next to your colleagues and, it's not the big television thing in the crypto.com arena. Mm-hmm. But in that, there was a woman who was in her 70s and she won a Grammy. And she was in tears because this is a case where it had been her whole life. Wow. There was also a woman who won a Grammy who'd been recovering from cancer and going through cancer treatment as she was completing her project. And she didn't even know if she'd be alive to be there. The stories of, people putting their whole hearts and souls into something. And at some point, with quite the story, they get their Grammy. So, I think they're really role models, they're inspirations. And, I would love to be 100 years old and have all kinds of more things that I've done only as a way of saying, look what's possible, go for your vision, shine your light.
Exactly. In addition to your pursuits in writing and recording music, you're also engaged as a body-centered psychotherapist, life work counselor, yes, social architect, and even an author. Can you elaborate on these roles?
Sure. They all come from the same place. Around my neck, I wear a necklace that has in sterling silver a beautifully carved heart and a treble clef, and I wear them together because whatever I do, it comes from the same place. The heart of the songwriter is the heart of the healer, and so in terms of the body psychotherapy, that's a field that I've been in since I was very young. It's something I pioneered in. I unfortunately had a lot of trauma in my early life, and my father's attitude did not make it safe in my home. So I was a very at-risk kid and was out on the streets a lot more than I would ever want a child to be. And when you're out on the streets, things can happen that aren't so good. And even before something, basically my life was on the line. When I was 16, a stranger came out of the shadows when I was on my way back from Fenway Park coming back from my job, and he tried to rape and murder me. And that's a very deep story of, how I basically had to choose my life, where I had to move beyond the grief and the trauma that I'd been living with that made me feel suicidal quite a lot, in spite of, I was a really good kid and I was a leader and I got really good grades and I got into every Ivy League school in the country and I worked and earned money. And I was a leader. I did community service. I founded organizations. But I was in such pain because I was so alone deep down, and the core of me was being suffocated. And people, including adults, were freaked out by how talented I was. You'd think if a kid was, humble and talented, that adults might lift them up. But I found a lot of adults who were competing with me. I was just a kid.
Wow.
Occasionally I found people that, were appreciative, but it was the minority. So I was not a happy child. And when I was 16 and out on the streets at night coming home from work, I was a potential crime statistic. But because I, really did want to live, and I really did always have a sense of mission that I was afraid to embrace. It goes back to the David Ortiz story of how I was afraid to be like Martin Luther King because I didn't want to be shot. And here at 16, I wasn't at all old enough to be that, and someone was already trying to take my life. So I basically, after physically trying to fight my way out, which didn't work very well, had to turn it over to the God I was never raised to believe in. And I told God that I wanted to live, and a little voice came through that said, then you need to make a commitment to your mission. And I said to God, I commit. And a little voice came through my heart that said to forgive the man. And without using my brain to even understand what forgiveness meant, I opened my heart. I spoke from my heart. I said to the man, I forgive you. And he burst into tears and stopped beating me. And it was for 45 minutes just bawling and telling me his life story and all the ways he'd been hurt. And metaphorically, that was my first therapy client. So when people say, how did you come to be a body psychotherapist? I would say, God anointed me. So instead of being, a crime statistic of a dead 16-year-old girl, instead I was, basically led to a path of body psychotherapy, heart-centered body psychotherapy, embracing the power of the heart, learning to listen to what our body has to tell us, and to learn how to translate that into self-care, into healing, into vision, into purpose, into action. And that's where that work began. And when I went to Yale, besides having a degree in music, I was also trying to study psychobiology. I knew about the mind-body connection, but the field hadn't really developed well enough to mirror what I knew inside. It was sort of like in a different dimension, like the spiritual part of psychology wasn't at all what they were teaching. And even like biofeedback was like a biotechnical kind of thing as opposed to a spiritual, emotional body thing. So I studied and tried to also do healing on myself because I had a ton of trauma to heal from in little institutes that had different methodologies of mind-body kinds of therapies and studied those. And eventually I realized that I knew something inside that no one had really talked about, which was about the power of the heart. So it led me to develop a whole approach to body psychotherapy. I co-founded the first state professional association in the field here in Massachusetts in 1989 and helped found the first professional association in body psychotherapy in the U.S. And in 1996, the year my son was born, I had a baby in my arms and was speaking at the very first body psychotherapy conference. And so it was a field I did a lot to innovate in. I ran a school training therapists for a long period of time. And I really love to work with individuals, with couples, with families, with groups, with communities, and help people go deeper and listen to, their own hearts and the collective hearts, and collaborate and communicate well and heal and make a difference.
Wow. I always tell people things happen for a reason.
Yep.
Always. There's always a reason behind what happens in your life.
Yep. And if you are able to mine from your experience, then all kinds of amazing things can grow, even from really hard experience.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Things happen for a reason. The people that you meet, events that happen, it all ties together in some way. So yeah, very interesting story. Now, is there a book about this story?
Well, I published 2 books. The first one is called Living with Vision, Reclaiming the Power of the Heart, that came out in 1989 when I was very, very young. The second one is called Healing the War Between the Genders, The Power of the Soul-Centered Relationship, that came out in 2004. So both of those books you can still get from Amazon, which means that Amazon asked me to send it to them, and they send it to somebody, and I basically make no money because they take all of it and I pay postage and that. But if people are interested, the books are still available. I wrote a training manual for my school. I ran a school training therapist for quite a long time. So they're there. And actually, in articles that were about me. And, I've done a lot of radio and TV and podcasts, interviews. There are a lot of different places that I've told that story. And so, I guess if you Google the internet, you might find places where I tell the story one way or the other from some point over the last, 40 years.
Wow. Where can the listeners go to learn more about you?
Well, there are a lot of places to go. My music is on all the different streaming platforms. Not of my 15 studio albums, the first one isn't, because I made that when I was very, very young, in my early 20s, and that was long before streaming platforms. But the other 14, I think most of those should be on streaming platforms. My website is lindamarksmusic.com, and you can just Google me. It's really interesting to Google and to see all the stuff that's out there.
Definitely is. Now, is there anything you'd like to mention that we didn't talk about today?
I'm just going to put out a little prayer, which is, for years, people have said that I should have a Wikipedia page, and you can't write it yourself, and you can't have someone write it. So I need a stranger who likes and is able to write Wikipedia pages to appear. I can feed them lots of links and the needed information. In fact, there was someone who even said they wanted to do it, and I put a lot of stuff together for the person, but then they didn't. So, I would love to be in Wikipedia, so people don't just come up and say you should be in Wikipedia.
Right.
And it's not something I can do myself. So I'll put that there. I would just encourage people to listen to The Silence of the Stars, because it's, the feedback I've been getting is people really love the album. It's an inspirational album, and the songs, will touch you and will hopefully be songs you'll want to share. And I've been doing a live stream almost 5 years. In early March, it will be the 5-year anniversary, on Saturdays or Sundays on my Linda Marks Facebook page, since the pandemic started and took away all my gigs. And I've kept it going because people from all over the world listen. And I love live performances. And if I can have the opportunity to be face-to-face with people, I love to do it. On the other hand, it's amazing how easy it is to just go to my piano and go on to Facebook, and almost it's in some ways it's almost like a vlog, because songs appear as they get written. If you go back to the beginning of the live stream series and go till today, you'll see, many, many, many songs get written in the context they're written in. So it's really, really cool to have that kind of documentation of life, documentation of what's been happening in all of our lives, and even some parts of my own journey. So if someone wants to tune in, you can just go to my Facebook page, Linda Marks, and I always post things after the live stream happens so people can watch the replay. So that's just another thing to put out there.
That's pretty awesome. Well, Linda, I had a great time chatting with you today about your life and your music. It's been a total pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And let's stay in touch. We're friends on social media. You got my email. Whenever you got something new coming out and you want to come back on the show, I'd love to have you back on.
Thank you. That's really wonderful. And thank you for uplifting independent artists. It's a real gift, because no matter how much we accomplish, we always feel invisible. And in this larger world, we're like a drop in an ocean. So people like you make us visible and audible. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. You take care and enjoy the rest of the game. And maybe you.
Thank you. I'm gonna go back and see what's happening with the Bills and the Patriots. So.
Exactly. I'm going to do the same.
Okay. Take good care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.
That was an excellent conversation. Thank you, Linda, for sharing your stories and, of course, your music. On the topic of music, we like to conclude each show with a song. Here's a piece inspired by former Boston Red Sox David Ortiz. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Heroes.
what's possible. Heroes offer us hope, make our worlds better, protect and inspire us. Heroes, what do we give them? Heroes are people. How do we show them care? Why do we shoot our heroes? Why do we gun them down? Does their light shine too bright in the darkness? By holding them up, do we put ourselves down? People need inspiration. It takes heroes to fan the flame, but evil can lurk in the shadows. What do we think is to blame? Martin, Robert, and John colored my childhood, serving the greater good. Now David, a copy to most, he is a good man. I just can't understand. Why do we shoot our heroes just when they're in their prime? Do their accomplishments make them a target for the guns and the hitmen of organized crime? What does this teach our children? How does this shape our lives? Real leaders bring courage and vision, traits that we need to survive. May our spirits rise. Can we turn the tides? The undertow is strong. May it not pull us down. How can we stop the shooting? Jail doesn't stop the crime. Can love find a way to end hatred? Will I see change in our time? Why do we shoot our heroes?
The Record Machine Show is a weekly radio podcast produced by Jimmy Howell Productions. All rights reserved. For information regarding distribution or adding this podcast to your website, please visit our contact page at therecordmachineshow.com to submit your request. Thanks for listening. See you next time on The Record Machine Show.
The Record Machine Show.